Sure, everyone, and welcome back to the WaterCooler Show and the opening of Season 2. Today we sit down again with Calum Traveler for a follow-up interview. So, welcome back to the show, Calum Traveler. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing fine. It's been a hell of a year, but that's neither here nor there.
So, the last time you were on the show, we talked about a lot of different things from the background of what goes on in the age development community. But one thing we didn't really talk about was going in depth on Orignally. And you've continued to work on this age since then. So I kind of want to start there and ask you, what was the initial inspiration for Orignally? What made you decide to go that route, to go with a garden age of all things?
So, Nabry has a complicated history to it. I was originally working on ages I'm still working on, a cathedral island in the Cavern Lake, a collapsed pod in a desert, and a bunch of floating crystals in a void, which, was a whole bunch of nonsense that needed to be put together. So I was envisioning all of this leading to potentially a inhabited age that we would have a small bit to concept for the Reishu apartment stemmed from that. I was developing the lore for the cathedral and the family that lived there. I realized, okay, this place is empty because I had the daughter character survive and she came back to the home and took everything out and moved it to the age that her family were caretakers of. So what's her story? Where was she? And originally in the drafting, it was just some ambiguous, I don't know where she was, but she was somewhere. So at the same time, I was thinking about, I really just want to get an age on Mula without it being a big hassle of puzzles and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Without having to have mechanics and all this stuff. Basically, as simple of an age as I could get away with. And I was like, okay, I'm going to challenge myself to develop this as quickly as possible. The rapid age development concept? There were a bunch of, Trebivdil, Voltal Gallery. Those were rapid age development contest winners. So I did a mini rapid age development contest for myself, which was just, how much can I get done with my current skill level in 1 month? Put it on the testing chart and see what people say about it. And so fast forward 6 months, and I had Nabry approaching something that was, Mula ready. It was basically, okay, here's the garden I'm approaching the design of this from. If I were a little girl who just lost her family to the fall of Denis, and some random stranger had just shoved me into the first available linking book that they found, what would she do? What would she be doing? What would the state of this garden be after she left it? And so designed Nabry with a bunch of imported objects from Chemo. Actually, no, it was Eder Dillon specifically that I started with. And I imported a bunch of familiar shapes and objects and mucked around with the scale of some things. The entry gazebo, for example, is just one of the smaller gazebos, but really scaled up. And then it has a big old, that tri-path thing in Chemo where the 3 paths come together. Mm-hmm. That's just one of those overhangs, but scaled way up. And Nabry essentially just started as, okay, this is just going to be a prelude to the cathedral stuff. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to I'm just going to put some art on the walls and telling this girl's story, and I'll have some journals and all that. And somewhere in the development of it all, I started carving out statues from the wall and making a big giant face in one corner and showing where the girl, Ashaba, had made a lot of deliberate changes to the age as she lived there. Like, there's two distinct eras to Nabri, the pre-fall history to it and the post-fall history to it, which you wouldn't really think is a thing, but the post-fall history is actually a significant part of its history because this girl was living there and surviving there.
I like that. That's a very well thought out plot line, and from what Nabri is, you certainly took it from just a rapid age development to a fully fleshed out age. I mean, you even had expansions at this point. You built a whole beach.
Oh, yeah. The beach was one of those things like, can I really do this? Should I do this? Nabri actually had 3 technical expansion updates to it. The first release, obviously, was just the garden and part of the back river. The second release was actually supposed to be the full release of the beach, but during testing, we discovered that some people were having extraordinary lag in Nabri for no explainable reason. So I basically had fully developed out the beach layout, and I was like, okay, at this point, I'm just gonna negate all the collisions, and I ended up having to disassemble Nabri piece by piece, disabling collision after collision after collision, and going in and checking what was going wrong. Eventually, I found out that it was a very simple thing in the end. I'd assigned a footstep modifier to the skydome. That is to say, the skydome that rotates with the animation cycle. So every single second, the game engine is doing a physics calculation, a physics calculation, a physics calculation, a physics calculation. And some machines were not able to handle that. So I ended up putting Nabri partially together again. Basically everything that was in the first area. And then I locked off the cliff tops because I was like, I don't have the time to handle doing the rest of this. I want this update to go out, because it has things that have to be reflecting story events that just happened. The guy falling off the cliff and such, and the new safety nets being installed. So I was just like, okay, I'm going to limit this. I'm going to leave most of what's here visible if people can really get out and look around, but it's not going to be physical and explorable. So I ended up having to shuffle a few things around, like the swimming trunks were originally going to be where they are now, but they had to be moved to inside the garden for the initial release and then moved back. So that was fun. But yeah, Nabri ended up having 3 big updates to it. I'm currently trying to get a 4th done, but my Nabri blend file does not want to export right now, and that's all another issue that is being looked into, supposedly, but I don't know if anyone has any progress on it one way or the other. It's been humbling, the testing feedback, let me just say. My biggest thing is, apparently when I reply to feedback sometimes, I come off as being defensive when I'm not trying to be defensive. I just have a unfortunate tendency from childhood to over-explain a situation because people would just be like, huh, I don't get it. And I'd have to really explain in depth and in detail to get a point across. And it turns out that a lot of people think that's defensive when it's just a habit of mine that is just, I had to deal with people who were either not caring to understand or were deliberately being, I don't want to understand. So
I can relate to that. I'm very visual with everything that I learn and do, and so I tend to over explain things myself, and I'll tell you right now, my mother has told me to just like shut up and simplify. But
yeah.
No, and plus you're dealing with the fact that you're in a chat, and I swear, I don't care how many years go by, you're always going to sound not the way you
More
actually
formal,
sound because there's no voice. So
Yeah.
that's not at all surprising, but yeah, I can see how it's also a humbling experience. I mean, let me just ask you, like, in regards to constructive criticism, like, has it ever frustrated you to the point of anger, or is it just, can you take it really well, or like what's your medium on that, you know?
I generally take things fairly well. There are some things that I do for certain reasons, for story reasons. Like, I designed Nabry's the cliffs with the ladders and all of that. I designed that because the age was gifted to a retiring Guild of Writers Master, and he took a lot of eccentric traits from my grandpa. So he's like one of those really hands-on, I want to handle all of the maintenance of this stuff myself. So cliffs have the built-in access for the overhanging lamps in a lot of places. And so in the early feedback, a lot of people are like, it doesn't make sense the cliffs are like that. And I'm like, it's supposed to be visual storytelling of the person who the age was gifted to. It's supposed to tell a bit about the person who was there, you know. And there were some places where I'd intended a Relto page to go in the future, and people are like, what, why is there a weird camera region here? It doesn't make sense. And I'm like, that's where a Relto page is going to go. So I'm just getting that preemptively built. Sometimes there's the feedback that's like, I don't want to say it missing the point, but sometimes there's feedback where I think people are looking at it from this has to be a perfect modern AAA game where everything has to have an immediate reason when I look at it right here, right now, instead of the Uru mindset of, well, maybe there will be something here later.
I would hope the majority would go with the latter option, because that's what I would be thinking. Like, oh, weird camera angle, kind of specific. Something is going to go here.
I think the only time I was ever really brought to frustration of anger was, I have the Easter egg in the pipe in Nabry at the beach where you can swim down to the end of it, and if you're being really stupid about it, you can end up falling down the pipe out of the swim region. And people were telling me, hey, this is a bug, and it's not, I'm falling down out of the thing. Even though I intentionally signposted it with, do not enter, danger, and there's a very audible bam, 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 bam that gets louder as you fall down the tube. It's an Easter egg to say you're falling down the pipe to the pump that is pumping all this water up the pipe and into the garden. It was a mechanical explanation. It doesn't really have a gameplay feature, but I still had a few feedbacks that were like, this seems like a bug. And I'm like, no, that's intentional. You're supposed to do that. It's an Easter egg.
I'm sorry, that's just funny. Like, the minute you said, do not disturb, I'm like, oh, everyone's gonna go in here. This is great.
There was a thing at one of the recent All Guilds meets where Explorers Emporium just released. I forget who said it, but Semjay was saying, there's a do not disturb, private area. You explore at your own, make up your own mind about how you're going to do things. And somebody was like, well, I don't have permission to go through there, so I'm not going to explore behind it. And I was like, are you serious? This is in a video game, especially Uru, where we're literally trespassing around Teledan. I don't want to say that it's like a bad direction that the community has gone in, because it is frankly fascinating, and I love how things have shifted in regards to, how people treat Uru as a real space and treat everything going on as a real space. It's just a different kind of the IC split compared to what I'm used to from the Game Tap era, which was really a whole lot of Cyan's we're doing things on a budget era, but it was still like,
oh my god, the
difference between the community then and the community now is kind of if I had not been keeping attention of things all these years, if I had gone literally from 2008 to today, I would have total culture shock. I would be like, this is completely nothing like how I'm used to people behaving in the cavern. Again, I won't say that it's a bad direction that things have gone in. I dare say it's a good direction. It's a very good direction. The community we have is very strong, and I dare say it's probably about as strong as it could be given all the circumstances that happened. And I said this once a while back, but for a really long time, Uru became a stagnant, unchanging thing, and people really got used to that. And that's not to say that stagnant and unchanging is a bad thing. I mean, a lot of games don't get content updates again after a while, but the community still keeps them alive. People love them. You know, that's still a good thing. But I think when those of us who wanted Uru to be updated again tried to get involved with things again, I think there was sort of a reverse culture shock again to the people who were already there. And they were like, this is not how things have been going. And I think across its entire history, the Uru community, I mean, from 2000 to present day, the last 25 years, I think the Uru community has always never been a behemoth, a singular whole, a cohesive whole. There's always been fractions and fissures between groups. There's always been that us versus them mindset. And Simon was intentionally invoking that early on.
Yeah.
And it's a shame it never got to a point where they could get away with what they intended to do, because Ubisoft and all that. But I think during our early teething period in 2020, when we were really getting updates, when we were starting to get updates going in again, and then we were starting to also, we were trying to find the balance between not stepping on the toes of people who just want to have their fun being in the game, but also we want to provide new stuff for people who do want the new stuff,
Yeah.
And it's always been this teething period where we have to figure out how to do the story stuff without stepping on other people's toes, try to do the story events. The spontaneousness of it is kind of not possible these days, just from the sheer we don't have the staff capability of it. 2024, again, I will say, has been an utter hell year for everyone I know, and that basically includes everyone on the storytelling side of things, and all the people that we were gearing up, we were trying to get in a groove and trying to get in a pattern for doing the story stuff, all of that kind of just dropped to a dead halt because of 2024.
Yeah.
With everything everyone was going through, the many losses that multiple people had, the sheer medical situations others were going through, and personal mental health issues that others were having amidst everything else. I mean, speaking personally, I had to deal with my grandmother passing early March. No, it was either early March or early February. I kind of forget which at the moment, but it's been a hell of a year. And in the midst of all this, I'm juggling so many emotions. I'm juggling having to deal with all this real life shit, like inheriting a house, and
Oh, wow.
and then we had back-to-back Mysterium in Canada, and then a couple weeks later, my family was holding my grandma's birthday weekend memorial. So we all went up to Lake Dillon in Colorado, and in the midst of all of that, I'm still dealing with various Uru stuff. Like at Mysterium, we did a big old presentation about stuff that's upcoming,
I loved what you presented in regards to Neighbory. You had the ratio apartment concept, which I think is a great idea, because just thinking about the fact that Relto is kind of our only sort of this is our house type content, especially when we're in the cavern and there are like housing opportunities and things like, the neighborhoods are for all the socials, but I mean, Tweak's like given us, what was the name of that house?
Fenrir House.
There we go. Yeah. So it's like, Yeah, we need some alternatives, some
Yeah, the
vibrance.
another thing is that when I was first concepting the apartment, my thoughts were, now then mind you, this was before we had the Ville Relto page. So we had no set precedent. We did not know if Cyan would allow Relto pages or not. It was already pushing a line to reshuffle the Relto book the way that we did from single pages to double sided. And my thought process was, okay, let's assume that we can't do Relto pages. How do we continue on the collectible gimmicks going forwards? What are our options? What are things Cyan would let us do? And at the time, a bunch of us were showing around ideas, and even now we still have the occasional thing about like a dunny apartment in a similar vein. And I was just saying to myself, okay, I'm going to create a project that's an extension of the Relto collection gimmick. And then during my development of the whole thing, I was running through so many different ideas at the time. But for context's sake, Elder Scrolls Online had just released the Skyrim Reach expansion, and I was really loving the vibe and the atmosphere of the more down to earth tribal sort of nature embracing vibes versus civilization. The sheer contrast of the Reachmen inhabiting this city, Markarth, and having all of their artwork all over this ancient abandoned city. It struck this resonant chord with me. And I was just thinking like, okay, you know what? I like this kind of general vibe set. What if I have a whole world that is like this? What goes into that history? What is all of that? And while I'm also thinking of all that, I'm also keeping in mind that Elder Scrolls Online at that point has had several years worth of housing and apartments that you can buy a house and you can decorate it and you do all this stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, the one thing that ESO has that, and I've always thought, and I was thinking this for a long while at the start, was that what ESO does is the Uru thing. It really nails a lot of the exploring a world, exploring a story within that setting. It does a lot of that right. And the thing that I was always thinking was, okay, this apartment housing stuff, this is basically just Relto times 10, turn the dial up to 11. So I'm going through as I'm concepting the apartment, and I think to myself, okay, what are all these various things that I want to do for this? And I'm trying to think to myself, how could I make this like Relto in a way without it being a direct copy of Relto? I mean, at one point I was thinking, okay, what if I have this book in the apartment that lets you flip through it and you click on the icons to activate or deactivate certain things? And then I kind of realized, no, that's too much work. That's creating a new GUI. Just no, for starters. But then I thought to myself, I want this apartment area to signify your progression through another story. Like, one of the things that ESO always did was sometimes there would be a major event and it would change the state of the world space that you can explore. For example, that year we had Skyrim, the City of Solitude. There was a tower that during part of the story it gets knocked down and then it stays knocked down in a pile of rubble afterwards. And so a part of me was like, okay, the way that I'm going about these collectibles for Reishu is there's going to be a thing that you can click and it will add a thing to the apartment and it will, reflect some of the journey that you've taken to get to this place. Again, this was still all at the time that we were like, well, what can we do with Relto and all that? And then kind of once we were allowed to do Relto pages, the motivation for the apartment kind of fell to the side as I worked. And especially as Nabry was just supposed to be like 1-2 updates maximum, and then that was it so I could focus on other project. Nabry sucked my attention like nothing else. Like, basically, for a lot of time, every time I was opening Blender, it was just to work on Nabry, and I was just like, I really want to work on something else, but I know I got to do this stuff for Nabry, and I eventually did manage to get Nabry to a state where it was point where I can just say, okay, it's good enough. I'm going to move on to other things. But some of my other projects, like the overflow station, have taken way longer to get done because of how much energy Nabry took me to focus on. And, collaborating with other people is always fun, but at the same time, it's kind of pulling teeth sometimes. I'm not going to name names, but because IRL is usually the cause for it. But it's like with some people, it's like, hey, can you help me with a thing? Radio silence, radio silence, radio silence. And then like a day, 3 days later, it's like, oh yeah, here, have, but it's...
Yeah, but I mean, it's... Well, not to segue, but, it's... We're doing...
We're doing all this volunteer.
Yeah,
so it's like, I can't blame other people,
I mean, if you were getting a paycheck, then...
If I was getting a paycheck, yes, it would be a whole lot more annoying, It would be like... but this is all volunteer stuff. This is all our own choice to do this stuff, If you're so overwhelmed from real life, you don't want to work on Uru stuff, you don't work on Uru stuff. It's as simple as that. And in the end, what Nabry ends up representing for me is the learning curve. Here's the concept, here's the continuation, here's the execution. How do I, improve on this? How do I do things? Where Nabry ends up having, I've had a lot of offshoot versions of Nabry where I just experimented with stuff. And it's let me figure things out,
Yeah, it's part of the creative process.
Part of the creative process.
And I think
in a lot of regards, I am playing catch up to a lot of people.
But I would say that your skill set is definitely up there with those guys. I mean...
Oh, yes, but I have been playing rapid catch up to their skill level. I'm getting feedback from Tweak about the lighting, the texturing on the walls and the cliffs in Nabry, and, stuff like that. And I'm just thinking to myself, okay, this is years of experience talking, being boiled down for me. I need to listen. I need to understand. I need to comprehend. My therapist told me at one point, you really take to new information really quickly. There's some techniques for, therapy, mental health, psychology, therapy stuff that apparently I've taken to very, very quickly compared to other people, which feels weird to acknowledge. It's just like, I want to improve myself. I want to make myself a person that I'm not ashamed of, many regards. There's so many different things, between age development and the whole personal improvement stuff. There's a lot of similar mindset to it.
So going back to the Reishu apartments, is this in the Age of Reishu? Or is it
is in the Age of Reishu.
Okay.
The apartment is a temple that the priestesses have set aside and have had people working to renovate into an apartment for people from Earth and Denis to come visit and begin a sort of cultural exchange. What the Reishu apartment ultimately stands for is you are in another world, and this is like what Yisha did with her journeys in Relto and all that, where you're going through and you're experiencing things. But what the Reishu apartment stands for more is less of you are intentionally exploring a mostly dead civilization to you are now exploring the cultural mindset of a living civilization that you have never really experienced before. I mean, in a lot of ways, the people of Reishu are like Earthians, people from Earth. But at the same time, they have a lot of Denis influence to them, but that is kind of faded in a lot of regards because, between the fall and the way that the people who were caretaking for Reishu itself was a very, very highly kept secret, only to people who followed a specific religion, really, in Denis. A cult, during the heyday of the cults, this was probably one of those many thousands of cults that existed. But the thing with Reishu is it clearly suffered some kind of disaster that was since patched over by modifying the descriptive book. And because the descriptive book was modified, that goes against the Writers Guild. That goes against the Maintainers Guild. That goes against a whole lot of Denny's society. And the fact of the matter was, this was a minor family in the Guild of Artisans, basically, who had a resource age where they got stone from, and then it suddenly turned into this whole religious cult, and it's become the specific damage to Reishu is honestly, I wasn't going to make this comparison when I was originally designing the age, but since the release of the new Riven, I can really easily say that with the enhanced scale of destruction that Cyan displayed, what happened to Reishu was almost on Riven's level of collapse. So the fact that the age exists, the fact that Reishu is existing and you can link to it and it is still stable and that stable enough to have people living there, to have big giant wildlife. The fact it's missing a sun is weird, but it's livable somehow.
But my question is this the same Reishu, or is this a
it
case
is the
of...
same Reishu.
Okay,
it is exactly the same Reishu. The people there experienced a disaster. They lived through it, and
so someone literally modified the descriptive book without changing it to like be a parallel version of the age.
Yes, it was a very important and a very calculated change. I mean, and it was very last second that it was even applied, because when you look at the map of Reishu in the apartment, you will see that it is a lot of fragmented land masses. It looks like the planet really came apart. And I've constantly, in the text adventures where we went to Reishu, I described it as being held together by these crystals. I mean, these big giant crystals that are very, very similar to the ones Calum was experimenting with to try and recreate the Tay crystals, or not the Rhyme and Tay crystals in one solid thing. He was trying to create something similar to that, and ended up creating a crystal that is very similar to the ones in Reishu by sheer coincidence.
Sorry.
And it was because of that similarity and the sheer coincidence of it that kind of allowed Reishu to even be discovered again. And Calum ended up going to Reishu and initiating first contact because of those crystals again. So when you go to Reishu and you see these big giant crystals everywhere, that is a sign of how the age was literally stitched together at the last moment. I have tentative plans for other areas of Reishu. There's also a part of Reishu adjacent to it called Chezasen's Realm, and that is also going to be visitable tentatively. My plans at the moment are, you're going to explore some Dunny areas related. You're going to explore the cathedral. You're going to explore the Pod 12 environment. And you're going to explore Calum's Crystal Age. And those three disparate things intertwine into this story. And that's your prologue set of ages to it. Or your first act of ages, basically. And then once you've gotten a taste for the style of what I'm trying to accomplish with these ages and all that, I am hoping to then do a bigger thing with Reishu and Chezasen's Realm, where where the concept is distance traveled in one place is distance traveled in another. And the goal eventually with it is just to do a lot of different things with this specific branch of history and all that. Because the way that I see it is, Uru as it is now is an anthology story. It is a story of different groups of people interacting with each other, doing different things. I mean, hell, even our restoration group does not have a consistent name to it. We are just the volunteer restoration people.
This is true.
So, Uru as it is an anthology. So what I want to focus on with my stuff is here is my section of the story. Here is, Reishu. Here is other stuff that can tangentially tie into Reishu and all of this stuff. And the idea is that while I'm doing my thing over here, other people will be doing their own things, like Tweak is doing his third path stuff, Semjay with the Ella Darrington stuff, and, and all these things, these individual story threads can coexist with each other and do some crossover between each other. Calum will mention, things about the Reishu or the Explorers Emporium release, at the same time he's talking about all these other things in his journals. And again, I apologize to anyone listening to this. I write a whole lot for my journals. They're very long and wordy, and the Reishu apartment is going to be a repository for a lot of those writings over time.
Well, let's talk about the story. You did this whole IC story online on the Beneath forums. You also have a Discord channel for it. What was the thought process behind doing it that way? And I guess if anyone, how do I want to put this? You've got journals that give you information about the plot line. Like you've got 2 in Eater Neighbory, which are great, by the way. But if someone wanted to really get a summary or get into the storyline that you've created for Eater Neighbory, Reishu, all this stuff, what would be the best way for them to do it? Because it's a very
that's an awkward question to answer, because the thing really falls down to we have plans for things, but we haven't been able to implement them yet. Like, we have the heritage document journals in Chiso. One of my long-term goals is to write a bunch of volumes for our ongoing story and put them in Chiso like that, so that you have this ongoing anthology of the story, and that people can read it to catch up on it. But that's a kind of an inauthentic way to experience some of it. And I think that in some regards, the story that we managed to tell over the last few years is not quite as complete as we want it to be in the game. There's some stuff that we story crafted that is not available to anyone, even though we have chat logs on the forums and all that. There's just some bits that we have planned out that just frankly have not been able to get into the game yet. And a lot of that just, again, falls down to part of it is a lack of time, and part of it is it's really awkward to try and figure out how to convey that information. And there's a reason that Cyan, in a lot of ways, relied on word of mouth for the story transmission, but that fundamentally failed in some regards. And I think these days, with the lack of staff that we have as storytellers, we're in even worse of a place than Cyan was. And so what I wanted to do with the Discord specifically, what we wanted to do specifically with the forums and Discord was to try to, bring back some of that energy from Cyan's era, the DRC forums. But, people aren't as big into that these days. They're more into Discord than web forums. With the Discord specifically, what I wanted to do is, do you remember in Game Tap when Sharper was asking around for Rills, and then he took him to Negulon, and then they came back after a whole adventure that happened off screen?
Yep.
I wanted to do that with a group of people, but actually have the adventure, not just say, we're telling you what happened, what you saw, etc.,
Well, let me ask you this. If you could choose another medium to present your work, what would it be?
There's 2 specific ways that I can answer that question. The first way is to have a AAA game budget and a huge staff and the ability to get things into the game in a timely manner. Just to have the story in the game in a more easily digestible way than it is currently. But the other way would be, and this falls into the realm of, hey, Cyan, please hire me, I have ideas. Ideally, I would like to have an anthology TV show. Uru already is like an anthology story, as it is. It's several years of attempted restorations and now a continued effort by volunteers. And the thing that I've come across with our story is a lot of us have these big, grand ideas, and then it takes us forever to implement them because we are working solo, or real life gets in the way, or, it's shot down by committee or whatever, And,
Shut down, really?
well, it's not really shot down, but it's like negotiated away from a bad idea,
Gotcha. Yeah.
or an idea that that other people are already working on. We don't want to try to step on other people's toes,
Right.
But yeah, pipe dreams aside, I think the most digestible means of getting the Uru story to players is auditory. There are some plans that we've been workshopping about audio log marker missions, where you collect a marker, it plays, audio, basically an audiobook reading of a chat log from 2004, for example. You go up to the top of the stairs in a gear, or you click a marker, and you hear you hear the narration about the DRC chatting about what fell climbing the guild hall, or
And
whatever.
that's very much in the realm of possibility, especially considering the fact that we have all the neighborhood recordings and such. So definitely very feasible.
Yeah, it's definitely technologically feasible. The biggest hurdle is getting a hold of all the chat logs, and I have seriously been neglecting chasing down leads on that, and it's one of those, the longer I put it off, the worse it's going to be things. But yeah, it's like sourcing down chat logs, sourcing down all of that history, and then narrating it, putting it in the game is probably going to be the most technologically feasible way of getting the story in bite-sized chunks to players.
Well, moving on from story, you mentioned earlier you've also been working on a pod age, and this, I want to point out to everyone, is something you can watch Calum do. He's got a YouTube channel.
I have a YouTube channel and a Twitch channel.
That's right. You've delved into streams.
Yeah. Originally, what I was doing was I was filming all of this offline and then editing it together, and then I was just like, this is so annoying. Anyway, my YouTube channel is called Calum Traveler, or at Dova's Mind, I guess. But you can find a lot of my Twitch VODs up there. I've been a little negligent about uploading them daily, but I do try to get them up there. And then I also try to do a stream every Friday where I do the blender stuff. I just basically do it live and let people see me struggle with it. And you can find me there on Twitch as Harley Traveler 263, no spaces.
Yeah, I like that you present it raw, essentially, because that, to me, just as a creative myself, I very much appreciate seeing like kind of the struggle or the frustration, because I can't tell you how many times I've been sitting working on a project in Maya, and trying to figure out why on earth this texture isn't rendering the proper way. So I'm like,
Tell
oh,
me about it.
good. I'm not alone in this. I'm not the only one that pounds their keyboard or sighs or says, I need a 5-minute break. So.
Yeah, let me just say that it is, there was a recent stream that I did. I still need to upload it, but there was a recent stream I did where I was modeling a Rubik's Cube, and I got the Rubik's Cube modeled. It's all in chunks, and I was like, okay, now to animate this thing. And then I just spent a good while just banging my head against the wall trying to sort out what the hell was going on with the animation, because Blender was screwing it up and sending things in weird directions I wasn't wanting it to go in. And I'm going to be honest, at this point, I think I'm just going to disable all the animation on and just leave the Rubik's Cube on the desk.
Mm-hmm. It's just
probably just scramble it and then leave it on the desk.
Oh, can we melt it? No, not really.
No.
But what I like about this is they're not only seeing your creative process, but your videos are almost a how-to.
That was the intent.
You've got the streams, and you've also got. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's why it's called Blender for Corman for beginners. It's literally just me trying to I try to do things that I know and explain what I'm doing as I'm doing them. And then other times but then I also, there are things where I'm like, hey, here's a new thing I learned just recently. So here's me explaining why you should have a visibility set for your environment map, and if you don't have that, don't hit the check that says don't render avatars, because that renders everything, including avatars, and it causes particles to freak the hell out. That was a fun bug to diagnose.
That kind of thing.
No, let me tell you. When there's a bug, technically possibly not a bug in the engine system, more so the particle rendering, maybe. Adam is looking into it, whether it's a bug, where the bug actually is. But in Corman, what you can do is for an environment map, you have a toggle that says render avatars, and then you have a little box that lets you put an environment set to it. A listed environment control object, basically. Say, this is this is the set of objects that are to be reflected, If you don't set it if you don't tell it what environment set to reflect, and you tell it don't render avatars, for whatever reason, the Plasma engine interprets that as render everything.
Oh, great.
Including particles. And so I was running, I was running a hypothetical test in Abri, and I was running it by my particle guy, Aaron. He does fantastic particle work, by the way. In the new, if you go to Ratio Apartment right now on Minkata Alpha and you look at all the pollen spores coming off the trees, that's his work. At the time we were workshopping that, we were also workshopping a hypothetical thing for Nabri, and I had an environment map that was incorrectly set up in Nabri, and because it was improperly set up, it was causing the smoke particles on the fire pit to freak the hell out. Like, I'm talking schizophrenic, trigger a seizure freak out. And we were having it to a lesser extent in Reishu. Eventually, once I figured out it was an environment map causing the problem, I started trying to troubleshoot, okay, what's going on with the environment maps? I was setting things up, trying to troubleshoot it. The one thing I never tried was the exact combination of settings of forgetting to apply an environment group set to the environment map. So I was never getting it. Until recently, I poked Adam about it, and he was like, oh yeah, that's not a bug, that's something I left in intentionally. And, I was like, once I figured out what was going wrong with it being missing the thing, he's like, so then, basically just like, okay, well, this is definitely something that even Cyan ran across, because if you go to any Cyan age that has a reflective environment map and particles in it, Cyan never reflects particles, ever. Not once. So clearly, in my assumption, they came across the issue where when trying to render particles in an environment map, what I'm pretty sure is happening is that particles are basically just little sprite sheets that turn to face the player, right?
Mm-hmm.
In order to render in an environment map, they also have to be turned to face the camera of the environment map. So you can start to see what's going to happen here is that the particles are going to get confused which camera to look at, and so they're going to freak out and spin around, and it's going to they're going to flip out and spin around all herky jerky, wibbly wobbly, timey wimey, and it's not good to look at. It is very, very, very bad to look at, and yeah. So yeah, one day after I figured that out, I went on stream and I was like, "Hey, here's a thing you shouldn't definitely not do unless you're sure you're not gonna have particles in your age." Basically, I explained all of that I just explained basically, and particles. Let me just say, particles are still one thing that Cormon does not do natively, so it's. Yeah, that's gonna be fun when they do that natively, and we get a slew of people making that mistake, not aware that particles don't like that, unless Adam figures out how to fix it. But I think the solution really is just to say, make sure you know what your environment map group is, and don't put particles into it.
Particles are not your friend in this universe.
Particles are not your friend ever.
I mean, you don't have to be so truthful about it, but you know. Well, okay,
Yeah, I think my throat's getting a little dry.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. So I'm just gonna say, yeah, thanks for coming back on the show. It was really nice to be able to talk to you again.
Oh yeah, anytime. It's fantastic to talk about this stuff.
I agree.
It's really fun sometimes just talk about it and just spitball about random stuff that whatever comes to mind. But it's been fantastic talking with you, and until next time, I guess.
And that concludes our episode with Calum Traveler. I'd like to again thank him for coming on to the show, and hope you guys will tune in to our next episode. Shirab Shemti.